So let's dive into one of the most foundational thinkers in all of history, Plato. He came up with this pretty wild idea. What if this world, the one we see, touch, and feel every day, isn't the real world at all? What if it's all just a flawed copy of a perfect reality that we can only ever grasp with our minds? This is the challenge Plato puts to us. He wants you to take this huge mental leap, to picture a reality that you can't see or hear, but that you can understand. A place where the perfect blueprint for, well, everything exists. And this is where it gets really mind-bending. For Plato, this world of ideas, or what he called forms, wasn't just some fantasy. He argued it was actually more real than our physical world. Our reality, to him, it's just a shadow, an imperfect, messy copy of the true, ideal version. But you have to wonder, where does an idea that radical even come from? Well, to get Plato, you first have to understand the man who cast a long, long shadow over his entire life, his teacher, Socrates. Socrates was famous for this technique we now call the Socratic method. He wouldn't lecture you or give you answers. Nope, he would just ask questions. Imagine this guy walking through ancient Athens, going up to the most powerful people and asking them, "So you say you know what justice is? Tell me." And he would keep questioning them until they were tied in knots, forced to admit they didn't really know. His whole point was that true wisdom starts by realizing just how little you actually know. Well, as you can imagine, not everyone was a fan of being publicly humiliated like that. His constant questioning of authority made him some very powerful enemies. And in 399 BC, they put him on trial, accused him of corrupting the youth, and sentenced him to die. For Plato, his student, this was absolutely world-shattering. How could the wisest man he knew be executed by the very city that claimed to value wisdom? That one question became his life's mission. And Plato's answer to that horrifying question was basically this. The world that killed Socrates, our world, of politics, of popular opinion, of what we see and hear, it's fundamentally broken. True justice, true goodness, it must exist somewhere else. And that conclusion led him straight to his most famous idea, the theory of forms. Okay, so how does this whole theory of forms thing actually work? Let's break it down with something super simple. Think about a chair. You can picture all kinds, right? An office chair, a beanbag, a fancy throne. They all look totally different, but we instantly know they're all chairs. Why is that? What's the one thing they all share? This is where Plato's genius really shines. He says that any physical chair in our world is just a flawed copy. It can break, it'll get old, it'll decay. But the idea of a chair, that perfect concept of chairness that we all have in our minds, that is the perfect, eternal, unchanging blueprint. That form, Plato said, is the true reality. And this isn't just about chairs. This is the whole shebang. There's a perfect form for everything, especially the big stuff. The perfect form of justice, the perfect form of beauty, the perfect form of courage. Our world, Plato says, is just a flickering shadow of that higher, true reality. Our senses can only see the shadows. If you want truth, you have to use your reason to glimpse the forms themselves. Now, as you can probably guess, this idea had massive political implications. In his most famous book, The Republic, Plato takes this theory and applies it to society. He asks the ultimate question, who should be in charge? And his answer was radical. Not the rich, not the powerful, not the popular. The only people fit to rule, he said, were the philosophers, the ones who had trained their minds to see beyond the shadows and understand the form of the good, the ultimate truth. To really hammer this all home, to make us feel this journey from the sensory world to the world of ideas, Plato gave us one of the most powerful metaphors in all of history, the allegory of the cave. So, picture this. There are these prisoners who have been chained up in a dark cave their entire lives, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows on the wall, and that's all they've ever seen. To them, the shadows are reality. Then, one prisoner is freed and dragged out of the cave into the sunlight. At first, the light is blinding, it's painful. But then, his eyes adjust, and he sees the real world for the first time. He realizes the shadows were just pale imitations. So he goes back into the cave to tell the others the amazing truth. But they don't believe him. They think the light has made him crazy, and they resist him violently. This story, it's Plato's whole philosophy in a nutshell. The cave, that's our physical world, the one our senses tell us is real. The shadows on the wall are everyday opinions and beliefs. The painful journey out of the cave is philosophy, It's education. And the world outside? That's the realm of forms, lit up by the ultimate truth, the form of the good, which is symbolized by the sun. Okay, so that's a great story. But it brings up a really practical question, right? How do you actually teach people to leave the cave? Well, Plato's answer wasn't just an idea. He built an institution that would shape the world. Around 387 BC, Plato started a school in Athens, and he called it the Academy. And look, this wasn't just some philosophy club. They studied math, astronomy, political science. It was, for all intents and purposes, the very first university in the Western world, a place designed to teach people how to use reason to find the truth. And for 2 decades, the absolute star pupil at this academy was a guy you've probably heard of, a brilliant young man named Aristotle. But here's the twist. Aristotle wasn't just going to follow in his teacher's footsteps. Oh no. He was going to challenge the very foundations of everything Plato taught. You know, Raphael's famous painting, The School of Athens, just nails this disagreement. In the center, you have Plato, pointing up towards his perfect, transcendent world of forms. But right next to him is Aristotle, with his hand down, towards the ground, basically saying, whoa, hold on, everything we need to know is right here, in the physical world we can observe. This one single disagreement would create 2 different paths for Western thought that we're still walking today. So, okay, fast forward 2,400 years, why are we still talking about perfect chairs and shadowy caves? What is the lasting impact of Plato's dream on us today? At its heart, what Plato gave us is this one incredibly powerful idea that there's a huge difference between appearance and reality, between just having an opinion and actually knowing something. He's the one who really championed the use of reason to dig beneath the surface of things and find the truth. And once you start looking, you see his influence literally everywhere. The idea that we have a soul that's separate from our body, that's got Plato's fingerprints all over it. The search in science and math for universal, unchanging laws, that's a Platonic quest. Even the very idea that we should strive for ideals like justice or beauty, even if we know we can't perfectly achieve them here on Earth, that's his legacy. And that brings us right back to that cave, and it leaves us with a really challenging question for ourselves. In our own lives, surrounded by our screens, our social media feeds, and endless opinions, what shadows have we mistaken for reality? What illusions are we content to just sit and watch on the wall? And maybe the most important question of all, what would it take for us to turn around and face the light?